one of the things that can take the anxiety out of the hosting is like, if you're there to just match make a little bit, it gets you out of your own head and into everybody else's shoes really quickly. I find, like, in my late 30s now, numerous waves of friends have come through that have been divorced, and that person needs to be scooped up, pounced upon, and inserted into this social scene. And you need to curate who they're connecting with at that party, so by the end of the night they had at least like 4 awesome conversations with really quality people, and they didn't get ever a chance to feel the anxiety. It's like, all right, I know my friend who's recently divorced is coming, and I know that she works in film, she's doing this. You could totally connect well with these people. If I introduce 2 people, I'm going to tell you 3 fun facts. Like, hey, Candice, this is Cheryl. Did you know she has a book of sketches that she published from spending time in Mongolia sketching the Mongolian countryside? And then I'll just walk away, because who wants to hear about how many siblings you have? You'd rather talk about Cheryl's book of sketches, right? And so you're just walking around dropping conversational bombs into everybody's lap. That is your role as a host. And as soon as you move into that role, if you feel anxious about hosting, it becomes more of a fun game pretty quickly.
Welcome to The Soloists. I am Mallory Everton. I'm here with my friend Diana Brown. And today we also have 3 other very fun friends to talk with about party planning and the art of gathering. I'm wondering if maybe we could start by just having everybody introduce themselves and maybe talk about their favorite party ever. And we could kind of get things kicked off that way. There you go.
Popcorn. I'll popcorn in. So my name is Candice Gutierrez. I am based in Los Angeles. And professionally, I actually do events for a large company, but a lot of my instincts around events has been informed by the informal training that I've had, being a member of the church, doing the like informal labor that comes with like having callings and being someone that's like, hey, let's gather and party. And I was trying to think of like a favorite party that I've had, and I have a friend who has just like has the best galantines, and she just puts on these great galantines that like I think like best friends are formed from it, because it's so intentional and so thoughtful and just makes you like love the women in your life.
That's a good one. Cheryl, do you want to go next?
Sure. Cheryl Johnson here. I'm originally from the DC area, but I've lived in Utah for 20 years now. It's really hard to like admit that. But I still claim my Maryland origins. Yeah, a favorite party, probably it's called Pool of Music, and maybe I'll get into more about what the pool part means later, but these backyard music nights that my roommates and I would put on, in each of these music nights, it's like a warm Utah summer evening. The sun has set, glowy lights are out, and talented friends of mine are playing live music, and it just is like this repeat moment of like absolute zen for me.
What about you, Dusty?
My name's Dusty, and I like to party, and I'm a filmmaker professionally and a party planner recreationally. Cheryl failed to mention about the Pool of Music is that it happens in an abandoned swimming pool. And so since she took that one, I'll take her other event, which is a Cheryl Johnson original, which is called Ghouls in the Pool. She and her friend Julene put on. Envision like literally secret garden level, walking through a hedge that's got like a tunnel through it. It opens up to an abandoned like 1970s swimming pool, and it's full of all of your friends in ridiculous costumes dancing with a skeleton up as the DJ with strobe lights. Behind the abandoned swimming pool is an acre lot where there's a haunted house and haunted walk going on with people being chased around by chainsaws. And then in the backyard is this amazing hang with all these really creepy baby dolls that are painted green with like bowls inserted in their stomachs for the dip and stuff. Like it's like this amazing spread of like horrific things to eat. So
can I get an invite?
Yeah,
100%.
How do I
Ghouls in the pool.
Ghouls in the Pool and Pool of Music. They sound
Yeah.
incredible. I want to be in the pool.
I know. Can I just say, so I've gone to like probably 5 or maybe fewer parties over the years of like Dusty and Cheryl, your crew in Salt Lake, just because I haven't lived in Utah for a little bit, but whenever I'm in town. But I do receive like invitations and I just like follow what you guys do on Instagram. And I'm not joking. It is touching. There have been times I've been like, this is so deliciously weird, but in a beautiful way and in a way that just like it feels like it jogs everybody out of their typical routines and whatever they're thinking about and worried about and just like brings them into a whole new world. I think one of my very favorite things about the parties that I've seen you guys highlight and your friend Ford Erickson, who I'm a huge fan of as well, is just like just the courage to be quirky. You know, you guys just not only embody like ease and it's all like very well executed, but you have this next level ability to just be silly. And I just feel like that is so cool because it invites everybody else to just relax and like tap into other parts of themselves. Anyway, I'm just like such a huge fan. And I think there's something genuinely really profound about it, which I think is why, you know, the idea for this episode came. It's not just like, we're not like an event planning podcast or whatever, but there's just so many unique ways to care for people and party planning good gatherings, like knowing how to execute an event well is such a beautiful way of caring about people that I think we can kind of miss sometimes. So anyway,
Well,
I'm a huge fan of everything you guys do.
I feel the same way. I could not agree more. Like there's this great Evanescence song called Walking Each Other Home, where she's just talking about how really that's all we're ever doing is just walking each other home. Like we're all just trying to get to the next destination, to get home to whatever you believe heaven is. And I think like there's something about that feels especially important for single people. And it's definitely been my experience as well that I'll leave a good party. And we can define party here in a second and talk about what we think that means. But I'll leave a good party and just remember how connected I am to everyone versus feeling like, oh, I went to a family gathering and I'm just so different than everybody else or whatever. Like because of the way those things can, like these gatherings are designed sometimes, you can end up feeling like an odd man out. And a party like Ghouls in the Pool, who's going to feel odd at that? You know what I mean? But I think that another thing that comes up for me here is just the fact that like effort is the best, and it like showing up is like your sort of like particular brand of I like this kind of party. I think people can feel that and they feel connected to you. Like there's a great part in Priya Parker's book The Art of Gathering where just at the very, I think it's just on the first page where she basically says like people think that you can just bring a bunch of people together and the chemistry of the group will do all the work, but I think there's so much that you get from the person who facilitated it, making an effort and saying, I'm showing up in my first act of vulnerability to plan this thing in this way.
I feel like started out my adult life a lot more shy and not as a party planner, party thrower, and then like kind of stepped into this role and gotten more into it. And then the more I've gotten into it, I realize I'm pulling from a lot of my high school stage crew skills and sensibilities here of like lighting the event. And it's like a production in a space, you know, as opposed to like time, like the space of like this is where people will enter and they will see this first thing and this is the emotion that will come out and this is the color scheme and this is like the emotions that we're trying to pull out here.
Could I actually ask a silly question, which is, do you all have a testimony of event or party planning?
I'll go first. So yes to a testimony, big time. And I think my testimony isn't of an event being cool and having like cool, clever activations or activation that's like a industry term, but like cool things where you're like, wow, I didn't think about this kind of photo booth. No. My testimony is of the ability for events to like alchemize relationships, to like come in feeling one way and to leave feeling another way. And that way being like positive and connected. And like as a host, I have a testimony of the ability for events, whether that's like I don't know, hosting just like a Relief Society lesson, right? Like that's an event, or a party at my home, or a gathering at my home. I truly believe in the ability for it to like pull out very vulnerable feelings as a host, and also like to share that with somebody. And it's a way of relationship building. It's a way that isn't just like romantic relationship building. It's like building it across like multiple relationships that like all happen at once as a host, that you walk in and you're like, I invited you into my home. I want to spend time with you. That feels very vulnerable. I put out food and I thought about you for weeks. That feels very vulnerable. And then to have someone come in and say, like, I also want to reciprocate that.
I feel like we've probably both experienced this on the filmmaking side, but I think that there's something about, because filmmaking is also very group oriented. It's very gathery, especially when it's like, I'm making my own thing. All my friends come over, help me make this thing. And don't you think that igniting up your creativity and involving people that way makes other people want to plan parties and plan films? And you know what I mean? It's like, I think it's contagious in such a good way too, for you to establish like, I've been thinking about you and I threw this thing. It makes other people like think about the types of parties and gatherings that they want to do too. So I think it's a great way to infect people with goodness.
Yes, and parties are totally contagious. I've noticed like if one person does something daring, you see a handful of other particles pop up in short succession.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like a byproduct of hosting, right? And I think, Cheryl, you've talked a little bit about this, is being able to see your friends in other contexts, and like that context being like creativity, self-expression, something that like is not necessarily there in the infrastructure of the church, but like is there in just like the just being, you know, humans connecting, right? Earlier this year, we hosted a 30th birthday party for my sister, and part of the party was everyone was assigned a version of her to come, and we did it. This is like based off of like RuPaul's Drag Race, so like it was
good.
a night of 1,000 Christines. That's my.
It was
my
such
sister.
a fun party.
And like
it was so good.
Everyone did a little presentation where they were like assigned a version of her, whether that was like a high school or like her favorite character. Like at one point, everyone was upstairs dressing up in my bedroom, like giggling. And this is like, not everyone is from the same friend group, not everyone knows each other. And it was like this beautiful presentation where it was like celebratory and also intentional of like, you've reached a milestone. Like, here are all your friends congratulating you on this milestone, but also like, how creative is everybody? This is great. Like, look at how intelligent and smart all of our friends are, and like creative and just engaging.
Yeah, it was like Christine's own little Taylor Swift Eras tour.
It was.
Like all the different eras of Christine's life. It was really cool. It was such a good idea,
so
Candice.
fun.
You're such a genius.
You know, I stole it from RuPaul, who is, you know, the genius of geniuses.
He's the genius. Dusty, what about you?
I got a testimony of gathering. Yeah. So I think sometimes, you know, they talk about your biggest weakness becoming your greatest strength. And I think as the kid who couldn't get the time of day from the kids in my neighborhood in middle school, it's like the lack of inclusion that I experienced translates into like a desire for deep inclusion. And so for myself, it's like, you know, if you plan the party, you're surrounded by the goodness that you bring together. And that's been personally really beneficial. But I also think it's interesting to look at like what happens. I have a strong opinion about having enough structure to the party, but not too much. So maybe an hour of live music, but not 3 hours of live music where you're trying to shush everybody the whole time, because people need that time they need the structure to come, and they need to get there and feel like they don't have to show. There's lots of people that have come to potlucks at our house where there's 80 people, and they'll tell me after, you know, I sat in the car for 20 minutes trying to get the courage to come in here because it was so intimidating. And so if you can break the ice with some kind of structure, it's like, oh, I'm going to hear the music. But then after the fact, that's when like I think the rubber hits the road for the ministering side of it. People get comfortable in the space. And I think about that just even in the last like 6 months. I'll be taking the garbage out like 2 hours after the party's really ended, and the last 2 people that love to chat until the midnight are finally like leaving my living room, getting the hint that I'm ready to go to bed. And I'll see, you know, when I walk out to take out the trash, there are 2 people standing out on my curb near their cars, and one's in tears and the other one's hugging them. And they've been chatting that whole time outside. And the
Mm.
ministering that's taking place there is often the ministering that would take place between Sunday school and elders quorum, in the hallway, in the gap between sacrament meeting, that hall ministering that's not happening for folks that aren't attending church. And so
Yeah.
I see people being swept up in love and in embrace, in getting what they need when the party is structured right. If you take ghouls in the
Yeah.
pool, for example, maybe you need a night of just hard dancing. But there's lots of
often
people
do.
that never set foot in the pool and stayed in the backyard by the weird buffet and talked to somebody, maybe one person the whole night. But
Yeah.
there's somebody else that's with Ford in the haunted forest back there, just getting the best laughs that they've had all year as they scare person after person coming through the haunted house. And so I look around once you bring that critical mass together, and if you've developed a community, a baseline group of people that are self-aware, that are able to ask people and express interest in others, and have that warmth and inviting spirit about them. Once you set it loose, there is some curation to it, but you can see in isolated pockets that people are having different experiences at the party, and they're having the experiences that they need, and they're
Yeah.
very varied, I think. And
Oh,
I
that's
think
so
God's
beautiful.
hands at work in that for sure.
Oh,
Um,
Dusty, gorgeous.
I just want to say that I know that everything my companion said is true. Having planned a lot of parties with Dusty, there's a lot of conversation that goes on beforehand about specific people in our friend group, specific people that we haven't seen for a while. What are some ways we can get them there? Who's a friend of theirs that we can invite to help them feel comfortable? In kind of a ward counsel-y way, there's a lot of intention coming from Dusty and coming from this friend group about like, how can we reach out to the one as we are entertaining the masses. And I guess I would like to talk about like my testimony of parties in terms of being single. Something that I'm very aware of in my own life is that I don't get to socialize without intentionally making it happen.
Totally.
Like people can have varying situations with roommates, and things of that nature, but the single unit nature of my life is that I am by myself until I make someone come to me.
Yep.
And for both entertainment and for times when I'm needing someone to talk to someone about when I'm going through hard times, that's like a big hurdle with my own mental health struggles. And it's like, okay, I'm down. I should be talking to someone. Who can I text? Who can I get in here? And there's definitely been moments when people have shown up for me in really special ways, but it's like I have felt that extra weight of I know what I need and I have to go get it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That can feel really heavy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so how am I going to tend to that part of my heart today? Phone call, movie night, you know, I'm on my way to go pick up some dinner. Who can I text and say, hey, do you want Chick-fil-A? Let's
Yeah.
eat it together. But when you think of people in more traditional family situations, and not saying that like you've got a family, you've got it made, all of your social needs are met. We know that comes with its own struggles, but um just that question of like on my way home from work, am I going to be able to have a conversation with another human being tonight?
Yeah.
Or is it me and YouTube
Yeah.
again? So I have a testimony that it is so important to create these moments where you get to look at another human being, talk to them about your day, ask them about their day, to be able to experience life with other people and not solo.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Oh, that
just,
is.
it's a need,
Yeah.
you know?
It totally is. Wow, that's all of you are so wise. Like all of your
beautiful, really.
answers just blew me away. Um, but yeah, I feel that so much. There's no one there in your default space when you're single, and to create structure for people to just get that, and to I hear in what you're saying, you guys very thoughtfully designed these to reduce barriers to entry, and thinking psychologically about what it means to walk into a party, and the anxiety that often accompanies this, like, who will I talk to? Will I know people there? The self-consciousness that we all tend to feel around these things. It's one of the strange tragedies of just being alive, that, that we all feel it so intensely, and yet it's so hard for us to really internalize, yeah, you know what, it's okay, you can walk in there, everybody else is self-conscious too. But there is something about just showing up to a party that can feel so scary, right? And I don't know, anyway, just to try and reduce barriers to entry, I find that so beautiful what you're saying.
For sure. Diana, it's reminding me of the Elder Bednar quote I've heard you bring up several times, that I'm going to butcher, where it talks about how the character of Christ. You do. He talked about how the character of Christ makes someone turn outward when the natural man makes them want to turn inward. And that's what I'm hearing in what you're saying and what Cheryl's saying, and really what everybody's saying, that there is something about the vulnerability of just admitting, like, I'm alone in this world. Like, regardless of whether you have a nuclear family, like, no one ever completely sees or gets you at all times. And it's lonely and hard. And it makes us want to cave in. And in Priya Parker's book, even, I think it was, again, just like in the introduction, she mentioned that, like, people are even reticent to say, you have to plan a funeral for me, because they don't want to require anything from anyone. And it's like, no, require things from people. Be connected to people. Ask for help. Like, let people know. Let a friend know you'd really love to talk to them on the phone. Like, it's all love when you look at it that way. And we all need that experience, but it does require that first act of vulnerability to say, like, actually do save this night. Save this date for me. You know, I'm planning this party, and save this date for me, or let's get a phone call on the books or something. And I think that's what makes what you all do, and what I hope to be doing more actively in my life as well, very brave and important.
It's a spiritual gift, to be sure.
Oh, it really is. Planning. Can I ask Dusty about a party that I went to of his that I have never heard the backstory of? When I was living in Salt Lake City, you threw a flirting workshop style party, and I have to know, I went in part because I was so intrigued, and maybe that was what you were thinking, but I also loved it so much that, like, this room of adults in their 20s and 30s was like, yeah, could you teach me how to flirt one more time, because it's possible I missed some lessons somewhere. Can you tell me about that party and the reason you threw it and how that came to be and your experience with it?
One of the most amazing backfirings of my entire event planning life.
That's great. That's great. We need those stories too.
That event originated from our time at BYU. A friend named Leland Spindler, who conducts the Lux Chorus.
That's a great name.
He had been like a published author, like in journals about flirtation, and so he gave this presentation, and we did it a time or two at BYU. And then we decided to have 102 was going to be the next level. We did Flirtation 101. The one that you attended, I believe, was Flirtation 102. So we were taking it up a notch.
Oh, no. I needed the prerequisite.
So, yeah, Leland, that was all Leland. We put it together, but the intrigue is there. And it's such a curiosity for people that, the house was packed.
Yes,
the first time we did it, more than 80 people were in an apartment in Provo. And in Salt Lake, there was at least that, and then some. The backfire happened when we had plotted out this thing where we were going to have two strangers kiss, and Leland was going to coach him through it. But here's the problem. The girl that I was dating, Sarah England was her name at the time. Bless your heart, Sarah. Okay. He asked for a volunteer, and she, being the helpful person that Sarah is, raised her hand, not knowing what she's committing for. So they go out, they have her go outside, and then they ask for another volunteer. And I have this split-second decision of, do I leave the girl I'm starting to date out to dry, knowing that she's about to kiss a stranger? Or do I self-sacrifice and kiss this girl in front of all of my closest friends? And if you think about kissing in our culture, you do not kiss someone in front of all your closest friends until your wedding day. Like it is not normal to just be like, I'm just going to lay it on while all my friends watch. Like that only happens on your wedding day. So I took the fall, and I had to kiss Sarah a number of times in a number of different ways at Leland's coaching in front of all my friends, like literally so packed that they're sitting at my toes as I'm sitting on my chair. There are people observing that closely.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was amazingly mortifying and the worst backfire of any of my schemes in event planning, for sure.
That has to be part of it, though, right? Like, I'm thinking about the people who are listening to this who maybe want to get into this. They like it's I mean, do you have anything to say about like it being okay to make mistakes, about what how you stay bouncy and gritty, and even when sometimes things backfire, or there are all the food doesn't get eaten, or whatever you might consider a failure or whatever.
Your girlfriend ends up kissing another man in
Right.
public. I don't know, all sorts of mistakes.
Well, for me, I think so much of it, a lot of what we've done is, music events, stand-up comedy events, performative displays of ridiculousness. And so often it starts with like, it's about us as the performers or my friends that are performers. It's about bringing the audience together for them. And as long as my performers are having a good time, that's my first priority. The audience can experience what they experience. But it usually turns into something so ridiculous where like Ford Erickson is trying to have like 8 of us are trying to put 100 t-shirts on him at once. This recently happened at our house. Ford almost passed out. I thought we were gonna have to like start cutting him off, but he's
That's
just
a way
like
to kill
out
someone.
to here with t-shirts on, and everybody else is just like watching in fascination. And I think what it is it's so ridiculous, it's diffusing to everybody else, where it's like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And it gives you something to comment on. And if that guy's willing to do that, then I'm fine just standing here being at this party. It's not going to be awkward for me because he's clearly very at home in this really strange space. So I feel like the performative aspect of it means that we're making it okay for it to feel ridiculous, and that it's also kind of celebrating the bomb when it goes terribly. If we can all laugh at the fact that it went terribly together, like it still was a a great time.
Any thoughts, Cheryl or Candice, about backfires or mishaps?
Yeah. I welcome them. I think let's define like mishap, right? Because there's a lot of different ways to mishap, right? Like not ordering enough food, like you can, get pizza DoorDash or whatever, right? Those like logistical failures are probably going to happen, and just like embrace it. Like people are forgiving, people want to help. I would say there's like the other kind of failure, which is like the human element. And I think we recently hosted a party, and somebody invited a friend of a friend, and this friend had terrible this friend had terrible worldviews that were like offensive to multiple guests, like just like outright sexism, just like shows up to a house party. I'm like, welcome to my home, I don't know you. And then you go and discuss how the half of the audience here is not equal to you. Go for it. Go nuts. Right. That was basically like this person's MO. That kind of failure, like you can't really plan for. It's going to happen, and also is a great way to like reaffirm and understand what your values are. Seeing all sort of the like women in the party be like, "Hey, that was lame. Don't talk to me like that." Yeah. And like that happening in real time, and that like workshopping of like getting feedback and being like, this isn't okay, right? Like, yes, it makes for an uncomfortable moment, but also it like affirms to like the people in the party, the community, that it's like, I actually don't want this in my life. Thank you. I mean, like, if we're gonna fail and learn, let's do it. Let's do it at a party. At least we get to like have something, good to drink and like eat at the same time.
I was just going to add, I think that's a really interesting example that you shared. And I think that in our experience, the smaller the party, the more curated your guest list needs to be. And perhaps that's a good takeaway. As we get bigger and bigger in our events, if we're casting a really wide net, it's okay for that guy that isn't very self-aware that we know to come, because he's diluted across so many people that he doesn't have the singular ability to override the whole. Does that make
Such a
sense?
good-
But
yes, it
but
makes
if
so
you
much
get
sense.
if you get the more and more intimate it gets, the more potential a single, stray data point has to skew how the party turns out. And so I guess if you're thinking about party planning, we're always thinking about, all right, who's the critical mass and how big do we want to go? And do we have the basics there in the personnel to handle a wild card like that, or the volume of humanity to dilute that person across so many conversations that no single person can't just dodge that person, leave that conversation, enter a different one. But yeah, it's really interesting how that reminded me of our curation of guest lists.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think that's smart because I think we probably all encountered people like that at parties. And my experience with them too is like scratch the surface. And this is just somebody, like you said, who isn't very self-aware and is probably really lonely. And sometimes you find that they're just coming, and often there's some kind of anger or bitterness or like sadness there. I often find that if there's a person like that and they're not totally taking over, they're just having a weird convo in the kitchen. Sometimes you get people who are brave enough to actually engage them in dialogue and be like, okay, well, where'd you get that idea and where's that coming from? I remember a while ago being at something like this, and there was just somebody who came in and was heckling, and you could just kind of tell there was that spirit about it. Like, you couldn't even tell, does he really believe what he's saying, or is he just trying to poke buttons? But when you actually engage them earnestly with confidence and not like acting like they're a terrible person, just kind of taking their ideas at surface value and being in dialogue, like after a while they kind of drop the charade and they start being kind of touched that people want to talk to them, and then they'll soften. And I feel like those are such good, like, sort of transformative things that I've seen happen at parties a lot. But to Dusty's point, I think you need to be thoughtful about also making people feel comfortable and not trapped in conversation. And if people want to engage with such a person, they do so on their own terms, not because they're like locked in a corner with them.
I think that's such a good point, though, Diana. Could we talk about guest lists? Because that does seem like a hard element of what you do. Like, how do you decide who's on it and who's not on it? And especially from a ministerial standpoint, like, as a person who is loving this way, I feel like this honestly in my daily life. And so I'm constantly asking, like, how much is too much for me to give? It would be so easy to just be like, I'm only going to be around people who make me feel warm and cozy all the time, and nobody else is allowed in. But I actually really, like, fundamentally don't believe that. Like, I feel like as a Christian, I don't believe that at all. Like, I am not only bringing people into my life, and this isn't to say party planning. I'm just saying, like, I don't only do things that are comfortable for me. I sometimes also go outside the bounds of my comfort to extend love and care for other people.
Yeah, the invite list and the method of invitation is something that gets a lot of thought. There's like different forms of communication have different connotations to them. Like, there's this feeling of like, oh, it was just a mass invite, like a mass Facebook invite. I just clicked all, versus like a text or like an in-person invite. Or when people hear about a party and they're like, oh, I didn't get the invite. Over time, you start to see like the invite and like what the emotions that invite carry with it and how that can affect people. When I do Facebook events, I click on everyone's name individually. I never do a select all. And part of that, like taking the time to do that for me, is to kind of like think of each human, like take a second, even if it's actually like a half a second, but just to be like, I know you, I would like you to be there. I pick you. I hope you feel that. I hope that, gives you that little ping when you get a notification saying someone invited you. I invite friends and roommates who have moved out of state and that will never be able to come, but I'm always just like, I invite you. I want you to feel like your presence is meaningful to me. There's also like, I have this, at this point it's a mental list. I should write an actual list of friends who have exited social media for one reason or another, and they've told me, like, please don't forget me. Please text me. you
That's
know,
so important.
and sometimes I forget them, and that's a fail for me. You know, that's something where I feel like, oh, I missed an opportunity um to reach out to someone for a larger event. There can be some element of like, yeah, just get all the people, tell them they can invite their friends,
Mm-hmm.
as long as the venue kind of has the capacity for that. But um I think taking the time with each event to be like, hold on a second, like, let's think about this. Let's think about the people in my life. So, yeah, I guess those are some of the considerations that come up for me.
I live out in DC and it's such a status conscious culture here.
Sure.
And I literally hear people talk about the things that they plan, the events or whatever, as like, I'm only inviting these types of people or people in this industry, or like, we're not inviting that kind of person. And like, it's really icky. And also, it just strikes me as so deeply immature. And it's one of the many things about living in like a big, world renowned city like this that just feels like so backwards, ironically, is like, okay, you think that puts you on top of the world? Like, okay, there's other places where people are just okay being human and like not putting themselves. And I just feel like that's what life is about. And anyway, inclusivity, not only along the lines that, professionally we like to think about it, religious diversity, racial diversity, whatever, but like inclusivity of people with different class backgrounds, people who don't talk the way everybody does, people who are kind of awkward and like, I don't know, just like or who you have to like nudge to get to know them a little bit more. I just
Yeah.
have always appreciated about the church just what a wide tent it is and how it pushes you to just not see status. And it's not to say that it doesn't exist and that it's not like in the room as people are deciding who they want to hang out with and who they're going to invite to things. Of course, it infiltrates those decisions. But I do think there's something about church culture that really pushes you to think past that.
Something on my mind is I think sometimes maybe with something like a guest list or who people might meet at your party, you might be worried about the way people might reflect on you or what people might think of you. But actually, it sounds like when you reverse your view and you're more concerned about other people, what ends up happening is probably the reflection of you, if there was going to be one, is look at this person who knows how to love all of these different types of people and welcome all these different types of people. And instead of being like, wait a minute, they're friends with them, or this isn't, I don't know, like that sort of, that feels like the ugly side of what could be a sort of like hierarchical or status driven thing, like what Diana was talking about with some of the DC culture earlier. And I'm hearing just the absolute opposite from you. And I do think church culture, like LDS church culture, helps with this as well. I've been to some really heartening, grounding gatherings recently where I felt like there was just no bar on who was welcome at this thing, and it made everyone more beautiful, if that makes sense. You know?
I think that the thing that we are all speaking to but hasn't been said yet is intention. I know
Mm-hmm.
that's like part of the conversation that we're having today. And when it comes to like building a guest list, right? Like I think Diana, you spoke about like guest lists that are built based off of external factors that like sometimes people can't control, right? That it's just like these people live in a certain class and a certain like have a certain shine to them. I want to be close to them, right? Like that has such a limiting factor. And on the other side of that is the idea that like you can't be everything to everyone,
Right.
right? Like I'm like my like home gathering, bringing people, it cannot solve everybody's problems and like issues amongst each other, and I can't include everybody. It's just like not possible. And I feel like sometimes in the church you kind of have that burden where you're just like, it's got a mass appeal, nobody can ever feel left out. But I think if you come at an event with intention, then that intention will help build a guest list, right? That it's like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. This is the like outcome that I'm going to have. This is then the people that need to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what I hear and what you're saying is that you're not excluding because you don't like the person. You're excluding because you have in mind a clear purpose for what you're trying to accomplish. And then that just kind of like everything flows out of that.
We've been talking a little bit about how our LDS culture might influence some of the gathering choices that we're making. What do you guys think makes an LDS party unique? And or does growing up LDS or being influenced by the LDS culture, does it give you any strengths and or weaknesses in the game that we're discussing?
I have lots of thoughts about this one.
Come on, bring them all in.
So, I'm on this podcast today to fundraise for this motion picture about growing up as a Latter-day Saint young man.
Oh, great.
So here's my pitch to you. But I think that the crushing weight of sobriety is the thing that makes the weirdest and most amazing diamonds in our culture. If you can't have sex and you don't do drugs, then all that's left is rock and roll. and so in that, and I mentioned this to you before, but I was in Maine at a film festival showing a film, and a filmmaker there found out I was from Salt Lake City. He said, I would love to go to a party in Salt Lake City. I would just love to know, what is that like? And because he couldn't even imagine, what a party would be like in a place without alcohol and drugs and, everything else. And so I think for me, like, so many of the amazing experiences that we've had stem from, all right, what do we have to work with? An abandoned swimming pool in Cheryl's backyard. What should we do with it? Everything we can possibly think of, right? And because of that, like, literally you walk into Pool of Music, Cheryl's favorite event, and I've had the privilege of playing at that almost every time because Cheryl's my best friend. Thanks, Cheryl. You walk in to play at that. You're in the deep end, surrounded by all your favorite friends with their legs hanging over the edge of the pool. They're sitting down the bottom of it, and there's all these twinkly lights above. I feel like I'm in the Lizzie McGuire movie. I am Gordo, and it's the Lizzie McGuire movie, and it's this amazing experience. And so I think that the absence of substances, the absence of fornication, the absence of some of those things that get kind of wild, in other parties, as the world would define party, results in like these really strange manifestations of beautiful things that would never otherwise happen, because it's the crushing weight of that sobriety is forcing it into weird and interesting avenues where it blossoms in the craziest ways.
What do you think he was picturing? Like, because there's a part of me that's just like, you can't imagine a party with no alcohol and no drugs. I mean, what did he think? It was just that it translated to boring, or was he picturing something more culty? Like, just out of curiosity.
Boring. Yeah.
Boring.
Just like boring.
Okay.
I don't think you could even fathom like what that could be like. And I said, well, there's lots of food and it's incredibly loud.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like such a good point. Yeah, and I've heard the same comments, right? Like everybody assumes it's going to be boring. And my response is normally like, maybe you're boring if you don't know how to just like manually tap into any other parts of you. Like, I think that what you end up doing with the crushing weight of sobriety is you end up finding other ways to manufacture a mind-altering experience. Like, I've been struck by, I don't know if this is just me, but like how every like stake dance growing up, which had, varying levels of edginess, but we're just like manufacturing club dynamics and there's no substances. But that strikes me as like, okay, with lighting, with music, like there's so much, okay, we're inviting you into a very different way of engaging your body and engaging other people. And then I feel like quirkiness and like weirdness is like another way that you just jog people out of their straightforward linear way of thinking and invite them into a different mode of being. It's like mind altering, and the silliness or the intentional quirkiness, I think that's another way, but that's how I would answer the question. I feel like people just get creative about how to walk you into a different way of experiencing time and all of that.
To like the uniqueness, right? And like speaking to quirkiness and the things that make us, unique party gatherers as Latter-day Saints. The older I get, the more I realize silliness, joy, youthfulness as like just a way of being, right? Like that is something that the world is actually trying to take from me as I get older. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is actually really great. And I used to think this was so lame, and people around me would be like, oh, I don't want to enjoy the things that are a part of my youth. I'm like, no, These are just things that are a part of me. I want to celebrate these things. I want to keep these things in my life and the people in my life. I want them to feel that like liberty as well. I felt like in college, a lot of people were like, these parties are lame. They don't have any street cred. And they're probably right. You know what I mean? They're probably right. But also the older you get, the more you're just like, guys, nobody who's like keeping score here. Like, enjoy what you enjoy.
Oh, Candice, I love that so much, in part because I feel like sometimes in the singles ward communities, it can feel like, oh, we're just doing all these things that are just like, that I don't know how to describe it, but it's just like, we're not little kids. You don't need to like corral us this way. But it's like, there is a different view, a different perspective you could take of that, where you're just grateful for reasons to get together. And I also, the thing that's coming up for me most is just like, never be too cool for any party. I just think like that should be such a like a war cry for all of us. Like, don't be too cool for any party ever. And I do think that's something that my Mormon background has given me in spades. It's just like, I have been to so many quote unquote lame parties where I had the time of my life because I met someone so interesting or because we played the dumbest game. You know what I mean? And it's like nobody was there to prove how cool they were. And there's an element of like, well, is there going to be, you know, a smoke room and a full bar, and how cool are the cool people at the cool party, where it's just like, well, like what Diana was saying, like how boring that you can't bring the party. Like it's something I've talked about with my nieces and nephews quite a bit. And I have one niece in particular who I am so proud. I hear her say this sometimes, that she brings the party. She doesn't expect the party. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. It's just like, you bring the party.
Well, and are people emphasizing reassuring things in their environment that make them feel like they're cool, or do they just like know how to show up as a person? Like, there's so many ways you could think about this infantilization thing, but like I have a friend who's Muslim and he drinks, but he like is trying not to, and so he's like processed a lot of anxiety about like, I just don't know what to do when I show up and I don't have like a you know, a glass of wine in my hand. And there's a part of me that's like trying to sympathize, but another part of me that's like, how, you know, how strange. He won't listen to this, so I think it's okay. How strange that like you feel like you need this little crutch to have a good time. And we should do another episode sometime on the art of conversation and small talk and how to like create magic in situations. But like that feels just like a more adult human thing to do, is to know just how to engage with other humans and like draw out and create a sort of magical situation instead of needing to rely on, you know.
I've actually heard the same thing though about phones. I think anything that you're using to escape the moment and anything you're using to try and look cool instead of just showing up is something that could, if let go of, you could end up feeling freer and more present. And I think it's the same with phones, right? Like we're very, very tempted when it's like, oh, I don't know anyone in here. I'm going to pull out my phone and everyone will know I'm busy and like, cool.
Yeah.
Because I've got my phone out and
Okay. I'll be the one to talk about the dark side of LDS parties if I have to. Please. If you want to talk about using something as a crutch and avoiding connection and conversation, we need to address the topic of game nights.
Oh,
let's do it.
Anti-game nights,
which is
get it, Cheryl. Get them. Get them, Cheryl.
I know it's a controversial opinion. I feel emboldened because Dusty and I share the same opinion.
Yeah.
But
someone didn't give Cheryl enough orange sheep, I see.
If you have survived LDS singlehood this long, you have been subjected to a heinous amount of game nights. And talk about a crutch for creativity and a crutch for connection. I mean, again, like a lot of this was probably more focused on college years, younger years, all the more glaring if you're still doing it later on in life. But just I don't want to play apples to apples. I don't want I don't want to find out who the most competitive person in the room is in a bad way. I would like to talk to people about their lives and their thoughts and not, you know, if they want to trade some ore or whatever. I just, yeah, it is. I'll add the caveat that like if you really love games, if you're like a gamer and that's your jam, and you've like got some new legacy game that you want to set up routine meetups with your besties with, like that's a different story. But using games as a crutch, just like let's get people over and then just um
Cheryl, I share your feelings deeply. Deeply. Like I was just like gripping the desk like, "Oh my gosh, we're talking about games." But yes, my household only wanted to play games throughout the pandemic, and I was just like, "I will sit and watch and I will offer one round of something and I'm done."
yeah. Yeah, and full disclosure, as someone with ADHD, like verbal instructions just mess with my head,
Oh,
and I usually leave a game night feeling stupid and mad.
same.
Yes, me too. I also
So
have
I
no
like
strategic ability.
it probably goes back to all the same reasons why people turn to alcohol as a social lubricant. They're worried about, am I cool? Can I come up with cool ideas? I'm not like a party planner. I will I will outsource the planning of this game company and let them provide the structure for the evening. But I think with a little bit of effort, we can give people actually unique experiences. And another thing that's been a focus for me over the last probably like 10 years or so, a recurring event in my life is birthday parties. And I've been on this journey of, birthdays coming up. I want to see my friends. And in and of itself, like just getting my friends in a room is enough for me. Like that'll make me happy. But kind of emotionally getting to the point where I can own my own silliness, my own desires, accepting that I can want things and it's not bad. I've really taken my birthday parties over the last couple of years to be introspective about like what makes me happy, what really makes me. I had this one birthday party where I was like, okay, if I'm making a Cheryl party, what do I want it to look like? Um, Green is my absolute number one favorite color. And so I was like, this might be fun. I'll tell everyone that they have to wear green. And I was like, I'm serious. This is real. Like, you must wear green. If you literally do not own anything green, you can wear black or white, but like nothing else that will like mess with the color scheme. And I had like a green photo booth with a bunch of different green props. And, there were some other aspects to the party, but there was a point that night where a critical mass of people had showed up and the room was filled, and I like walked back into the main room, and I was unexpectedly hit with this like palpable wave of joy at seeing so much green. I was like, whoa, I knew that I liked green, but I didn't realize like how giddy this would make me feel to just see like green, 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 green everywhere. Um, and yeah, like sending out the invite initially, I had been like, is this weird? Is this like really demanding to like control what people are wearing? Um, but then seeing like an idea pulled off where we all did it, we all wore green. And like that feeling of joy that it brought to me on my birthday. Um, to get to a point where I can own that and be like, I don't think anyone was offended. I don't think it ruined anyone else's night. And hopefully some other people enjoyed the um, chromatic integrity of the evening. I think if it feels out of your reach, if it feels inaccessible, um, do some Googling, do some research, do some introspection. Please don't reach for a bottle of game night. all I'm
Well said.
Cheryl.
So well said.
It's so clear to me what an art form this is and how much it has to do with expression. And I think what you're saying so well is the closer that you get to your pure expression in the events that you bring people together for, the more that people will feel your spirit, your humanity, and theirs will naturally bloom as well.
I wanted to ask a question about, so obviously this isn't going to be, I really do think that event planning is a spiritual gift. And I think you guys all are blessed with the gift. But there's also something about like money, that it can just cost to do parties well, especially if you really kind of want to go all out with a theme or have food and design some of these welcoming things. What do you guys think about that? Because I think that is something that puts this form of ministry, I suppose, a little bit out of reach for some people.
I'm just super rich, so it's like not a problem.
Right. Yeah. Blessed.
Hashtag blessed. No, I think some of it is like cumulative. Like I've just like slowly made tiny investments over like really a decade, right? Where it's like buy this thing and this is like going towards having more events in the future. I would say this for anyone who is like sitting here listening to this being like, I don't have the money to like put on a big thing, then like that doesn't preclude you from connecting with people. Like do things at the scale that like fit your budget and like once again do it with intention. I will say this, like think about the experience of people and like if you want to include people and let them know that it's like, hey, we are doing a potluck. Like I want to see your version of XYZ dish, right? Like it's not just like a money thing, but it's also like, hours to clean my house or, do whatever.
Yeah.
Like all of that is like a ton of labor and not everyone also has like the time to do that. So yeah, I would just like think about ways to like include people in taking away some of the like initial investment, right? Like I you don't have to do everything, right? You don't have to cover all the food. You don't have to cover all the entertainment. Like all of that should be a shared effort and labor, and that's like what makes it special. And if you verbalize that and communicate that, people are like so willing to give, right?
If you go to the thrift store, you can buy metal forks instead of plasticware every time. I hate plasticware. And so I have a giant pot full of thrift store silverware that we just pull out and set on the table every time we have a potluck with 50 people at our house. And that way you're not, my aesthetic is thrift store. And I think that the people overlook that really quickly. So I don't think you have to feel like it's got to look like Martha Stewart designed your party. Function over form. But I think, I don't know, I feel like our stuff's always been rather inexpensive. I think there is like a time commitment that comes with it. Like right now, a group of us are rehearsing, we're learning the Twisted Sister Christmas album again. Diana, I think you came to that in 2019 when we did it, but so the 80s metal band Twisted Sister put out a Christmas album. We're learning it. We're going to play the whole thing in our living room for friends. And that's just more of like a time commitment than like monetary commitment. And I think then, crowdsourcing, like the potlucks that we do, there's an expectation that everyone brings food and everyone does. And there's way too much food every time. And it doesn't cost us much at all.
Yeah, I think people will respond to effort in a lot of different forms, whether it's time spent or thought put in. It can be money, but it doesn't have to be money. I think like just some practical tips, like twinkly lights, instant ambiance creator, and like LED lights are really inexpensive. I have a problem. I have like totes and totes of lighting because I'm always like a slightly different shade of warm white or but you can definitely start small with that and like some visible thought, like some visible cohesion. I know how to source all the cheap stuff. Like Walmart has $1 to $3 colored plastic tablecloths. If you can have a few elements that are the same color, that just brings this like visual cohesion that marks, thought, intention, all of those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, something like this is an idea I've been wanting to get off the ground in a more regular way, but like a movie night where you serve food that's like associated with the movie, like watching Matilda and giving everyone like a big fat slice of chocolate
Chocolate
cake
cake.
so you can eat it with him, with Bruce Bogtrotter in the moment. Like it's a movie, you either have it already or you can rent it for a couple bucks, and then, you know, $10 on cake frosting plates or whatever. But just that extra layer of putting some intentionality into it.
I think a takeaway for me from everything that you guys said is that maybe money is another kind of crutch that we sometimes use to supplement with
Yes.
intention and forethought, and you can hide behind it, right? Like, okay, I don't have to bring my whole self to this party planning experience as long as I know there's going to be amazing food and people will just talk about the food and then I don't have to worry about the other elements. And I hear you saying, like, don't worry about the money.
Professional clowns are cheaper to hire than you'd think, at least in Salt Lake. So
Wow. I'm assuming they're more expensive in LA, but
Yeah.
You guys,
There might be a union that we have.
they're probably a union. Yeah.
The clown union.
I have just enjoyed this conversation so much. I really hope a lot of people are inspired by this because
Yeah.
we need more parties. We need more good intentional parties.
they're so important. Anything else you all want to add before we wrap up?
I would say this. If you are listening to this podcast at this moment and you're like, I'm not a party person, I am in full resistance of this whole conversation, I would say this. Like, everyone here on this conversation, like, we have had skills that have been built. And like, I invite you, like, if you don't think you're a party person, you probably are, because you are a person who has relationships and connections. You don't always have to have a clever theme. You don't always have to have cool stuff, but you just have to have intention and like an outcome that you want. And that like outcome comes from like observing and loving the people in proximity to you, right?
I love that.
I remember the first party I went to in Salt Lake that I caught wind of, and I went to it alone when I first moved here, and it was so scary walking in. I can totally relate to that, like, terror. And I cornered one person that I vaguely recognized and like literally grilled him with questions for like an hour. And then I left and I was like, okay, did it. It wasn't as bad as I thought. And so I think if you're dropping in on a new scene, you have to put yourself out there for a minute. But as soon as you start hosting, you curate the type of community that you're a part of and you build it. Pick up a copy of How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a terrible title for a book. It didn't age well, but the book itself will help you learn how to put people at ease, make them feel seen, make them feel loved, and those connections will echo out of your world into others in beautiful ways.
Yeah, I am actually a decided introvert, which is not the same thing as being antisocial, but it means that I have a ton of fun planning parties, getting in my own head, being creative, spending time coming up with ideas, and then don't enjoy the actual parties as much. Or at least it takes a couple days of sweatpants and ordering out food to recover from it. As an introvert, what I thrive off of is meaningful one-on-one connection. And so even if your foray into event planning is picking one friend and coming up with an event, something for the two of you to do once a month, that's where you can pour your intentionality, that introspection of figuring out what brings you joy. It's also a really beautiful way to spend your time of thinking what brings other people joy. How can I like make someone else's night, whether that's attending someone else's event and just saying like, I'm going to focus on this one person. I'm going to talk to someone long enough for something real to come up in the conversation that's not just surface level. But yeah, it's all about connection and having joy. And that's men and women are, that they might have joy. So party on.
Preach.
I love it. Thank you all so much. This was such a good discussion, and I think such a unique, sort of under-discussed topic, and you all are extremely wise.
I appreciate the use of time and agency in this situation, you know, and creativity. Obviously, it's so much creativity to be like, I will make like what we've been saying, alchemy, like I will make a boiling pot of like human connections exist that did not exist before. It's a gorgeous witchcraft, and you're all so good at it. We'd love to have another conversation. We should have a conversation about conversation at some point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Small
Because
talk.
that is a big part of gathering and going to gatherings. And also, Diana, something and you said, oh no, it was something Dusty said, going to parties alone. We should talk about that.
Yeah, totally. That was like one of the most relatable parts of this when you were talking about everybody confessing to the 20 minutes in the car of anxiety before they walk into
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
And usually there's like 30 seconds of like, and then something puts you at ease. But yeah, that's very relatable. So this is
Yeah,
great.
it's
Well,
interesting.
thanks.
I think nobody can avoid that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is just like, I'm going to go in there and kill it. And usually if they do, they go in and they're unexpectedly met with something,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, one of the things that I've just been thinking through this whole thing is just confidence and what a gift it is to model confidence for other people, not an egotistical kind,
Yeah.
like, but just something that's like, I'm at ease in my own skin.
I also feel like it's just another plug for sometimes things going wrong too, because I think
Yeah.
when we show up human, other people are allowed to show up human too. And I think sometimes we're surprised by how, like, I so many connections have come in my life from me like showing up with like just a bunch of broken pieces of things in my hands and being like, I'm so embarrassed, and somebody helps me put them together. You know what I mean? And so I just think there's something about that humanity that's even if it isn't going well, is still just such a good gift to give people.
Totally.
You guys are the best. I love you all.
Thank you.
Happy
guys.
holidays.
Fun.
I wish I could go to all your holiday parties.
Also,
yes,
I like that
Diana
this-
as well.
This this feels like when you're leaving a party and you say goodbye like 10 times and then just keep
I know.
talking. We've been doing
I love you.
that.
Did I already say I love you? Okay.
I'm assuming the recording is we cut it earlier. Is that right?
It's
we might just
technically
keep
still
going.
recording, but it's
still
really
up.
This is the conversation out in the street by your car where you thought you were fun, but actually the real deep stuff comes out.
Yeah.
The game we play at all of our parties is as our friends, our close friends, are walking out the door, we ask, "Hey, Carl, how's your family?" And just see how long we can keep them there, and just volley them with questions from across the room. And we've had people, they wander back in, they talk to you for a second, and they wander. Someone else cuts in, and like an hour and a half later, they're like, "I was trying to leave.
I was gonna leave.
What happened?" And literally, like, we do this all the time. And once you've been to a few of them, you get in on the inside joke and start doing it to people, and it's very fun.
I am immune to this tactic now. I just go, they're fine, bye.
Those
Goodbye.
who've been there long enough just slam the door around us and leave. But,
Yeah.
it's
So
good.
funny.
I love it. I love it so much.
All right.
Well,
I love
have a
you
great
all.
week.
Thank
Thanks
you
again
all
for your
so
time.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to continue the conversation with us, we've got a couple of options for you. You're welcome to email us with any feedback or topic suggestions at hello@thesoloists.org. You can also follow us on Instagram. Our account handle is the.soloists. And if you're not on Instagram, don't let us give you FOMO. Enjoy being unplugged from social media. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.